I'd like you to be familiar and comfortable with some of the basic ways of striking with your hands. Some of the techniques may employ some particular or special weapon formations with your empty hands, but in this particular piece I just want to look at basic strikes. So what I'd like you to do is start by standing in a horse stance, and I'll come a little closer here on my knees. You stay in your horse stance. And I want you to take your fingers together, curl them once, curl them twice, and put your thumbs in front. This is the fist that I want. Sometimes I see people do interesting things with their thumb or their fingers. They'll overlap things. I don't even know how they do it. And this is what I want to see, as basic as you can get. So we have our fists. We have them tightly at our sides near our pectorals in this chambered position. The first thing I want to look at is the horizontal punch. And it looks like this. I'll execute some with the left here. Let's try that from a side view. So we have a right horizontal punch, and we have a left horizontal punch. I call it horizontal because the knuckles are aligned horizontally. We'll call this a vertical punch. This will be a horizontal punch. A few things I want you to notice. The first is that my elbows are tightly rubbing against my body. I'm not doing this. Please don't do this. There's not a lot of support. Your arm is very long, and in this case it's also bent. And if you were to make impact in this way, there's just a lot of instability in the shoulder and the elbow and the wrist. There's a possibility for you injuring yourself, and there's also a possibility for you not to injure the opponent, which is what we need to do if we're defending ourselves. So by keeping those elbows tight to your rib cage as you deliver that punch, your arm is going to be well supported during that strike. The other thing I want you to notice, and I'll do it from the side view, try to have your wrist be as straight as possible. Don't punch like this, don't punch like that. You're focusing with the two big knuckles. That's the only thing that should be making contact. So don't strike down here, don't hit with the pinkies. That right there is the only thing making contact with the target. So again, don't punch this way, don't hit with your thumb or these guys, and don't hit with a bent wrist this way because it'll sprain, but everything is nice and straight. And one thing you can do to assure that your wrist is straight, a couple things. One is to hold out your punch. Again, I'll come here kind of close. Hold out your punch. In this case, it's my right arm. I'm going to close my left eye, and I'm going to look down my arm like it's the barrel of a rifle. And I'm going to imagine that I'm shooting a bullet out of my index finger knuckle. Now, if Superman came by and bent the barrel of the rifle, clearly no bullet would shoot. It would get stuck in the barrel. Well, that's synonymous with saying your wrist would get broken if you punched someone that way. So to have a straight wrist is the same as if you're imagining you're shooting a bullet out of your knuckle. So you want these bones to be straight. Another thing you could do is find a wall. And you can use one hand or two hands and place only your two biggest knuckles on the wall. And then pull your feet back just a little bit and lean into the wall. Your hands don't have to be very far apart, maybe only that far apart. And then put them on the wall and walk your feet back. Walk your feet back just a little bit so that you have a percentage of your body weight leaning into your hands. And you might start to notice your wrists will wobble just a little bit. They'll start to shake with that body weight on them. You could also do push-ups on the floor or just hold a position on the floor. Something like this. And it's okay if they shake a little bit. Just make certain that you're focused and those wrists are nice and strong. So that's the form for the punch. And we're going to be punching from a variety of stances. The first thing I want you to get comfortable with is pivoting from a neutral to a forward bow with your punch. So what I want you to do is stand in a left neutral bow, make your right fist tight and bring it to your pectoral. And what I'd like you to do, you can chamber both hands actually, is pivot to a forward bow and execute a right horizontal punch. And go back to your neutral. So pivot, punch, pivot and chamber. Punch, chamber. Just get comfortable with that motion. We'll do that from a side view. Pivot, punch, back to chamber. Punch, chamber. Make certain you do both sides. So let's face the front now in a right neutral, and we'll pivot, striking with the left hand. Back to a neutral. Pivot and punch. Get comfortable with that. Think about your stance, think about your elbow and your wrist. So that's a basic horizontal punch. I also mentioned that we can execute something called a vertical punch, and all the same elements apply, except now that your knuckles are aligned vertically. And that has some good applications. Depends on what target you're striking. Different fists will contour the target differently. So I'll let you know which punch is most appropriate. So that's the vertical punch. You may also see other weapons like the hand sword. If I bring my fingers together and tuck my thumb, my hand is in this fashion, and I can strike with the meaty part of my hand, the infamous karate chop. Right? You can do that from a variety of different angles, but that's what we're striking with. Don't hit with the pinky, don't hit with the wrist. Both of those will hurt a lot. Hit with the meaty part of your palm. If you were to make a fist, you could also strike this way. We'll call that a hammer fist. So you could strike the opponent this way with the base of your fist. If you open your hand, it's the same idea, but we call it a chop. So be certain you're comfortable with forming a chop and forming a hammer fist. So those are some other basic strikes that we'll be using. So there you have it, 4 basic strikes.